Assalamu alaikum. First, I want to tell Dr. Jessica, you are not a minority in this gathering. Your voice is quite the majority, and your spirit is even more than that. Thank you very much for your contribution. And to the other men who were brave enough to join us today as well, we honor you and your presence. Thank you. I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting me to come here. This is my first time for the MAS-ICNA Convention, so it's been a pleasure and an honor to join you. This is one of my favorite topics. I will say now that this is probably my life topic at this point moving forward. I've reached nearly 75, and I think that, inshallah, I see some buds sprouting from the work, and we're looking to younger generations to step up and carry the work forward, inshallah. Dr. Jessica has really said everything that I could say about this issue, so I'll try to focus. Everything is so interrelated that it's difficult to separate out one aspect from the other. But this latest phenomenon of actually unmosques, and then we have remasking, seem to be necessary efforts at this point. Leaving the mosque is really not an option for women, although I understand fully the reasons why women would leave the mosque. It's very painful to experience the segregation that women face coming to our spiritual places, our spiritual homes. And I think one of the issues that we need to address is that women don't really share how traumatizing it is for us as women when we enter those mosques that treat us very poorly. We keep that to ourselves because we love Islam, we love our communities, and we really don't complain a lot. But I think that now more and more we're beginning to open up and share the pain of having to walk into a mosque after having powered organizations in the community where people not only respect your opinion, they actually seek you out, invite you. Women are actually powering other organizations outside of the Muslim community. So that when we enter the mosque, you find yourself relegated. I used to say to second-class citizenship, but I'm now saying to non-citizenship. And that's not, it's no longer tenable. As we gain more knowledge about our religion, and we want to participate fully in our religion in terms of how we live our lives, how we raise our children, and build the society and the nation, it's absolutely critical that women are respected, honored, and in their mosques, building that so that we have viable Muslim communities, and certainly so that we have a place where our children can be socialized as viable Muslims. Now, I should say that we are a very small nonprofit. Women in Islam was founded in the early 90s in crisis. And since then, we have been crisis-oriented. Somehow, you know, when tragedy happens or some outrageous thing happens, we are called upon to be present, to have a voice, to try and speak into that void as practiced Muslim women, right? And with a heavy focus on human rights and social justice. So when we want to bring our passion and our love back to our community to continue building, and we're met at the door, often a locked door. There are many mosques actually in places like New York City where women are still told that there's no place for them to pray in the mosque, and they're literally turned away. So though we hear from those women, and they're horrified that you can actually go to a mosque in New York City and be told that there's no place for women. So we have to stop that. I mean, that's not acceptable. It's much easier to walk out and leave, just I'm fed up with this, I'm not gonna take it anymore, But often that fulfills the agenda that's out there, that, if you walk away, you don't have to be dealt with anymore. So it's like a fulfilling prophecy, out of sight, out of mind. So it's much more difficult to stand in the fire, to insist that our mosques open up the door. And because in this part of the world we are registered as 501c3s, religious institutions, that somehow the board of directors or others who are leaning very heavily with cultural practices as opposed to Islamic principles, the power dynamics that Dr. Jesser spoke about earlier also reside in this part of the world as well. So all of these are challenges that have to be met and dealt with in our context. And we can no longer accept, being turned away at the door. We have to insist that they open up the doors. We have talked with various institutions, religious institutions, about letting us be the bridge. We don't want women to come and have to bring lawsuits against our Muslim community on discrimination charges, for instance, right? So, or to have women have to line up and hold demonstrations outside the mosque because the mosque leaders will not behave in an Islamic manner. Women really are shy about doing that kind of stuff. And often it's the only thing that they will respond to, interestingly enough. But we're hoping that through this kind of work, and as it gathers more and more momentum from people like you in this room, brothers and sisters, that the leadership will begin to see that it's in our interest, our collective interest, to reach back and try to revive the Islamic tradition, the prophetic tradition, the way of our prophet. We love to claim certain hadith, that we feel very comfortable with, and we disregard those others. So we're asking, no, we need to be more wholesome in our application of Islamic principles, and we need to be very clear about what are the distinctions between cultural practices and Islamic principles. And yes, there's a lot of struggle that we have to be willing to engage with. Sometimes power, one of our early scholars used to tell us, well, he didn't tell me because it was much before my time, but he said that power concedes nothing without a demand. So we have to be demanding now our rightful places in the mosques. And there is, of course, a way to do that. I always emphasize now that as we are activists in our communities and as we agitate for change, we must always bring our adab with us. And I get a lot of pushback with that from some of my sisters who are very strident, and they push back. Well, adab is one thing, but now, we're on the front lines here. But as Muslims, we have to bring our adab with us. And that doesn't mean we walk away from the responsibilities and our passion and our commitment to justice for all of us, men and women. Because when women are marginalized and really discriminated against the way we are, women are not only impacted, but the entire society, our whole communities are impacted. And we say that this is not a woman's issue, but this is a community issue. And we have to see it as that. And I also appeal to our brothers to not be our allies, but to join this struggle and advocate for the rights of your sisters, your mothers, your daughters, to be fully welcomed and included and honored and valued in our mosque and in all of our Islamic institutions. So when women are disempowered and alienated, it also impacts how we parent, how we raise our children, and what we have to transmit to future generations. And if women are not feeling okay in their skins as Muslim women who are masked, mind you, they're not going to be able to transmit any positive examples to their children. And so I call on brothers to stand up with us, you know, and not behind us, but sometimes in front of us to make sure that they hear your voices, that they hear our voices, and back the sisters who are strong enough to stand sometimes in very, very devastating circumstances. And with the advent of social media, that can be a daunting thing. I'm sure you all know about Facebook or Twitter shaming. So when you stand up against the status quo, we have to expect that there will be that. But we also need everyone's voices to speak out and say, as Muslims, this is not our way, that we can disagree and that we have the adab of disagreement, and we have to learn that. And scholarship is critical. And I'm throwing this now back into the women's court. We have to make the commitment to study our religion. And it is grueling, you know. I think it's much easier to get a PhD from one of the Ivy League universities, quite frankly. But having said that, I think that in this day and time, certainly in the Western context, you will probably need both. You need perhaps the Ivy League degree, but you also need to have a path to traditional Islamic learning. And again, we are advocating that those channels be open and made more accessible to Muslim women so that they can become the scholars for the next generation. So again, I honor you and I welcome you and your smiling faces, and I'm glad you're here. And I'd like to fight, but at some point, you'd like to see your successes, kind of grow. So I'm standing here before you, passing the baton. But I encourage you to fight, to insist every day with every fiber of your being that the mosques open up, that the walls are taken down, that the curtains move back. The women who choose to be secluded have a right to be secluded, but that is not a universal. It is a specific, right? And it should not be imposed on everyone. We are losing so much wealth because we are not seeking the incredible gifts from our Muslim women. So I encourage you to be brave, to be bold, be strong, take a break, take good care of yourself. Self-care is critical. Women don't do that. Muslim women sure don't do that. So I encourage you to factor that into your activism and your scholarship. But at the end of the day, you have to stay in the fire, you have to stand in the fire so that you can say one day you passed on something to your children, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.